Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue bringing you the story of Hoai and Tiểu San. And as what unfolded in the previous episode, the journey between Hoai and his father still remains unfinished. There are still unspoken pauses, emotions that have yet to be clearly arranged or understood. In the last episode, everything stopped at a tense moment, when the man who once abandoned Hoai and his mother returned, carrying money and inheritance documents, not as a stranger, but with the intention of making amends. But Hoai refused, not because he didn't understand, but because what he had gone through for more than 30 years could not simply be erased by an apology. And then before anything could settle, an incident occurred. Hoai's father suddenly fell ill and collapsed right in front of them, throwing everything into a state of panic that no one could have anticipated. Moving into the new episode, the air still seemed to carry the urgency of that moment. Everything happened so quickly that no one had time to fully process it. The moment he saw his father fall, Hoai no longer held on to any distance. There were no more refusals, no more firm rejections like before. In that instant, his only instinct was to rush forward and catch the body that was losing control. A flicker of fear passed through his eyes, a feeling he himself didn't even realize where it came from, only knowing that things had suddenly become far more serious. Hurried footsteps, urgent calls. No one clearly said anything, but everyone understood that he needed to be taken to the hospital immediately. Mrs. Thoa followed as well. She said nothing. She simply walked quietly behind, but her eyes could not hide the concern within. It wasn't just simple care. It was a feeling difficult to name. Distant, conflicted, yet as if something long held inside was slowly dissolving after many years. At the hospital, the atmosphere here felt entirely different. The initial rush was gradually replaced by long stretches of silence. The doctors quickly took him in for examination. The doors closed, separating the inside from the outside, just like how Hoai and his mother stood there, unable to see, unable to know what was happening beyond them. Hoai stood in the hallway. He didn't sit. He barely moved. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the closed door. His mind was no longer filled with clear thoughts, but fragments of memories, overlapping emotions without any order. Things he once thought he had forgotten now appeared more vividly than ever. In another corner, Mrs. Thoa sat quietly. Her hands were clasped tightly together, as if trying to hold on to something. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Just silence. Yet that very silence made everything feel heavier. Time passed. No one knew exactly how long. Only that each passing minute felt longer than usual. Nil. The door opened. A doctor stepped out. His expression was serious, and he called Hoai and Mrs. Thoa inside. The moment they stepped into the room, the air seemed to thicken. The doctor's words were not rushed, not hurried, but each sentence, each word made it impossible for the listeners to remain calm. The test results were in, and it was not good news. Hoai's father had liver cancer, not at an early stage, but already progressed to a serious condition. The chances of recovery were very low. Those words were not loud, not dramatic, but enough to make everything collapse. Hoai stood there. He didn't react immediately, just a long silence. A silence so deep that even he didn't know what he was thinking, because inside him now, there was not just a single emotion, but many intertwined. The pain of the past, the wounds that had existed for so long, yet at the same time, a growing sense of loss, realizing that the man before him might not have much time left. The doctor continued to explain. If they wanted to prolong his life, there was only one option left: a liver transplant, and the donor would have to be a compatible family member. The room fell silent again. No one spoke, but this silence was not the same as before. It was heavier, more suffocating, and carried with it a decision no one could easily face. Hoai still stood there, his eyes no longer focused on anything specific. as if he was thinking, but unable to think it through, because everything had come too fast, and was too difficult to accept. Mrs. Thoa looked toward the hospital bed, where the man lay, weak, silent, no longer the figure from the past, no longer the man who had once hurt her, but simply a human being, standing on the fragile line between life and death. All those years of resentment had not disappeared, but they were no longer the same as before. Instead, there was a different feeling, one she herself could not name. In the days that followed, everything was no longer chaotic like at the beginning, but far heavier. Hai's father remained hospitalized. The machines around him continued their steady sounds. The space retained its familiar stillness. And there, Hai and Mrs. Thoa stayed. They did not leave. They did not say much. They simply remained by his side, as a way to face everything that was happening, even though within each of them, there were still so many things left unspoken. Hai? He was no longer standing still like before, but he also couldn't move forward with any clear direction. Inside him now was a conflict so deep that even he didn't know how to name it. It was no longer simple emotions like anger or the absence of it, but a state of turmoil, where every thought that appeared was immediately pulled back by another. On one side was an entire past filled with wounds that had never truly healed, an incomplete childhood, voids that no one could ever fill, moments of watching his mother silently endure, without speaking, without complaining, yet making him understand that nothing had ever been as easy as it seemed. The lack was not only material, but also the feeling of not having a complete family, questions without answers, moments of wondering why everything had happened the way it did. All of it was not something that could be forgotten with time, nor something that could simply be set aside. But on the other side was a reality he could not ignore. That man, even though he had abandoned him, even though he had forced him to grow up through incomplete years, was still the one who shared his blood, and now was lying on a hospital bed, weak, silent, no longer the image of someone who once walked away, but simply a human being, waiting for a chance to continue living. Those two sides, neither was lighter, neither was easier to choose, and because of that, Hai didn't know which way to lean. He couldn't find a clear answer. The more he thought, the more tangled everything became. The more he tried to analyze, the less he could make a decision. Mrs. Thoa saw everything. She didn't ask much, didn't pressure him, didn't give any imposing advice. She simply told him gently that she would not force him to do anything, that this decision belonged to him alone, and that she wanted him to have enough time to think carefully, not to choose what others considered right, but to choose what he himself could accept, what he could face, and what he would not regret later. Those words were not long, not heavy, yet they made Hai feel even more clearly the weight of the decision before him. After that, at the doctor's suggestion, he went for testing. Everything happened in silence. No one said anything beforehand. No one knew what the result would be. But deep inside, there was a vague feeling that if the result was not compatible, perhaps everything would become simpler. At least, he wouldn't have to face this choice. The waiting time was not long, but it was enough to make each passing minute feel heavier than usual. And then, the result came.
Hai's liver
was compatible. He could be the donor. He could be the only one who could give his father a chance to prolong his life. The moment he held the result in his hands, he didn't react immediately. There was no clear expression, just silence. A silence so long that even he didn't realize how long he had been standing there, because everything he had thought before, all the possibilities he had imagined, no longer mattered. Reality was right in front of him, clear, unavoidable. The opportunity had appeared, but at the same time, it was also the hardest choice he had ever faced in his life. No longer the question of can or cannot, but should or should not. That night, the space around him seemed quieter than usual, but inside Hai, there was not a single moment of true calm. He lay there, eyes closed, but unable to sleep, not because his body wasn't tired, but because his mind couldn't stop. Old memories came back piece by piece, without order, yet clear down to every detail. The difficult days, simple meals, moments of seeing his mother turn away to wipe her tears so he wouldn't notice, times when the two of them could only rely on each other to keep going. The lack, the hurt, the feelings he had once tried to bury deep, never wanting to remember again. All of it now returned, not to weaken him, but to remind him that what he had gone through was real and not easy. But alongside that was the present, the man lying on the hospital bed, silent, unresisting, with no choices left of his own, only able to wait and place his hope in the very son he once abandoned. Those two images took turns appearing in Hai's mind. Neither disappeared, neither completely overshadowed the other, only making him realize more clearly that this choice was not just a decision, but a boundary between the past and the present, between what had happened and what he would have to face in the future. Now, when everything was clear, when the opportunity was right in his hands, it was him who didn't know which direction to take. Meanwhile, after long days hovering between consciousness and unconsciousness, Hai's father finally opened his eyes. No longer were they weak, unconscious movements, no longer vague, instinctive reactions, but a conscious gaze, slow, heavy, yet clear enough for him to understand everything happening around him. The cold white ceiling, the unchanged lights, the steady sound of machines echoing, like a quiet rhythm reminding him of a life that was becoming increasingly fragile. He didn't turn his head much, didn't ask questions in a rush, didn't panic. He simply lay there, looking into an undefined space. But within that gaze was awareness, an awareness of his condition, an awareness of what he was facing, and an understanding that the time ahead was no longer as long as it used to be. Not years, not unfinished plans, but days that could be counted, slowly passing, and impossible to hold on to. But what troubled him was not how much time he had left, nor the fear of facing the end, but the things left undone, the things he had missed, the choices he hadn't made when he still had the time. Now, even if he wanted to, there were not many chances left to make things right. Among all of those, one thing stood out more clearly than anything else. Not money, not what he had built, but Hai, the son he had not been there for, the son he had abandoned, the son whose most important moments in life he had never been a part of. He hadn't watched him grow up, hadn't been there when he was needed, hadn't fulfilled any of the responsibilities a father should have. Now, when everything had come to this point, he no longer wished for anything grand. He didn't ask for more time. He didn't try to hold on at all costs, because he understood that there are things that must eventually be accepted. But within that acceptance, there remained one wish, very small, very simple, yet the thing he longed for the most at this moment. That was, before he left, he could hear from Hai a single word of forgiveness, just one. Didn't need to be long, didn't need explanation, didn't need to erase the past completely, just one sentence, enough for him to know that the mistakes he had made would not be something he carried with him until the very end. For him, that alone would be enough, enough to ease his heart, enough to release the weight he had carried for so long, enough to close his eyes without so many lingering regrets. And not only that, he also expressed his final wish, not with force, not as an obligation, but as something entrusted, something he had thought about for a long time before saying it, that if possible, Hai would take everything he had built, not for wealth, not for material value, but because he wanted what he had spent his entire life creating, not to end here, not to remain unfinished, but to continue, to be completed, to be developed in another way, by his own son, the one he had never had the chance to walk alongside, yet the one he trusted, not out of duty, but because he believed that Hai could do it, could continue the path he himself could not finish. Those words carried no heavy expectations, no pressure, only what remained. After everything outside, nothing seemed to change, but inside Hai was a storm rising endlessly. He stood there, between two sides, unable to move forward, unable to step back. One side was the past, the years he could never forget, the wounds deeply rooted, the memories that, whenever recalled, still felt heavy, the emptiness that nothing could fill. The other side was the present, the man lying behind that door, weak, silent, no longer able to choose for himself, only able to wait. One side was resentment, existing for many years, unfaded, unforgotten. The other side was blood, an unbreakable connection. No matter how much he tried to deny it, could never be separated. Those two sides had no right, no wrong, only things he had to face on his own. No one could decide for him, no one could fully understand, and no one could bear what would come after his choice. Would Hai be able to step past the past? Could he set down everything that had happened to save the father who once abandoned him? Or would he continue to keep his distance, the way he had lived all these years, between forgiveness and not forgiving, between letting go and holding on, between choosing and remaining silent? The answer had not yet been spoken, but that very silence made everything heavier than ever. This journey was not over yet, and everything would continue. Stay tuned for the next episode to find out what happens next. And don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts about Hai's choice.
Xin chào mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến video về câu chuyện tình yêu của Tử Tiên, mình xin lỗi, của Tiểu San và Hải nha mọi người. Nhưng mà câu chuyện hôm nay thì lại không nhắc đến Tiểu San mà xoay quanh câu chuyện về hành trình nhận bố của Hải nha mọi người. Bây giờ thì mình đang lấy video nối ra. Bây giờ thì mình đang bắt đầu dọn dẹp bộ nhớ để có thể làm việc. Tại vì việc làm nó kiểu giống như là nó hao rất là nhiều ấy luôn, rất là nhiều bộ nhớ của máy tính luôn, và mình phải dọn thường xuyên. Mình đang cố gắng để làm video sớm và đều nhất có thể để có thể đưa đến mọi người. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video sau.